Imagine this. You wake up one morning and something feels wrong, not in the obvious way, not a broken arm or a sharp pain, but a quiet, gnawing sense that something inside you is fractured, missing. You move through your day, scrolling, consuming, laughing at half-funny jokes, nodding to people in conversations you don't care about. You meet the expectations. You say the right things. You smile when you're supposed to. But if you paused long enough to ask yourself why you're doing any of this, you wouldn't have an answer. Now, imagine that you look around at the world and realize you are not alone. Everyone is running on invisible scripts, chasing goals they never chose, avoiding discomfort as if discomfort itself were a mortal enemy. Weakness has become a way of life. Not the weakness of body, but something far more dangerous, a weakness of spirit, a quiet surrender that no one talks about. And yet, paradoxically, we live in an era obsessed with strength. Motivational quotes flood your feed: be your best self, crush your goals, never give up. There are gyms on every corner, podcasts about mental toughness, and influencers shouting about hustle culture. But deep down, don't you sense that all this noise is hiding something? If we are so strong, why does everything feel so fragile? Why are people breaking down in record numbers? Why does anxiety rule us? Why does meaning slip through our fingers like water, no matter how hard we try to hold on? Now, imagine Nietzsche sitting across from you, watching this world, watching you, with those sharp, penetrating eyes that seem to see into the depths of the human soul. Imagine him asking, "What have you done to your strength? What have you done to yourself?" What would you say? You see, Nietzsche saw this coming more than a century ago. He predicted that modern man would become a last man, a creature obsessed with safety, comfort, and mediocrity, terrified of risk, incapable of greatness. A creature who trades the agony of meaning for the anesthesia of distraction. Someone who has forgotten how to will anything real. Think about that for a second. Have you really chosen your life, or are you just following a path carved out for you by invisible hands? Your job, your relationships, your beliefs, how much of it is yours, and how much of it is fear disguised as choice? What if Nietzsche was right? What if all this exhaustion, anxiety, and quiet despair isn't because life is hard, but because you've been trained to be weak? Trained to avoid pain at all costs, to seek approval instead of truth, to choose what is easy over what is right. Imagine standing on a cliff, staring out into a storm. The wind is howling, waves crash against rocks below, and there you are, frozen, watching from a distance. Because that's what weakness looks like, standing still when life demands you move. Avoiding the storm when the storm is where you find your real self. But here's the paradox: what if strength doesn't feel like strength at first? What if real strength feels like walking straight into that storm, into pain, uncertainty, and rejection, and choosing to do it anyway? You've been told that happiness is the goal. That peace of mind, safety, and comfort are the markers of a good life. But what if this is the lie that makes you weak? What if chasing happiness makes you hollow, and facing struggle, embracing suffering, is the only way to become whole? And here's the question Nietzsche would force you to confront. What if everything modern society tells you to avoid, pain, struggle, risk, is exactly what you need to become strong? Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped running. If you stopped numbing yourself with endless entertainment, meaningless work, and shallow relationships. Imagine if you stood still long enough to feel everything you're afraid of feeling. The loneliness. The fear. The anger. The hunger for something real. What would happen to you? What would happen if, for the first time, you stopped lying to yourself about who you are and what you want? Nietzsche didn't believe that strength was about domination or arrogance. He believed it was about becoming someone who could carry the weight of existence, someone who could say yes to life even when life is brutal, unfair, and terrifying. But before we can even begin to talk about strength, we have to see the hidden weakness that is shaping every part of modern life. Because the most dangerous weakness isn't the one you see, it's the one that hides beneath the surface, whispering in your mind, controlling your choices without you ever knowing. So, if you've ever felt like something is missing, if you've ever wondered why you feel so empty despite doing everything right, if you've ever suspected that there's a strength in you that has been buried, suffocated, forgotten, then stay here. because the truth is darker and more liberating than you've been told. And to understand it, we need to dig into the roots of this weakness. We need to go back to why it exists, how it was born in you, and how the world keeps it alive. Because only when you see the prison will you even know what freedom looks like. Now ask yourself, are you ready to see it? But where did this weakness begin? It didn't happen overnight. You weren't born afraid. You weren't born craving comfort over truth. You came into this world wild, raw, screaming, a force of life untamed. So what happened? The answer lies in something far more sinister than we like to admit. Imagine growing up in a world that teaches you every single day that your worth is measured by how well you fit in. From childhood, you are praised when you obey, when you color inside the lines, when you say the right things. You are punished when you push boundaries, when you ask too many questions, when you refuse to sit still. Think about it. How many times were you told, don't be difficult, don't be angry, don't cry, don't speak unless spoken to? Slowly, piece by piece, your natural fire was extinguished. Carl Jung warned us of this long ago. He called it the creation of the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society. A mask that hides all the parts of ourselves deemed unacceptable. But here's the danger: the more you rely on that mask, the more you forget who you really are. And behind that mask lies what Jung called the shadow, all your repressed anger, fear, passion, and truth. All the parts of you that could give you real strength, but that you were taught to fear. So here's the first shocking truth. Your weakness is not natural. It was manufactured. Modern society doesn't want you strong. It wants you manageable, obedient, predictable. Because a strong person, a person who knows their own mind, who embraces struggle, cannot be controlled. Friedrich Nietzsche said this more clearly than anyone. He called out slave morality, the system of values created by the weak to make strength look evil and weakness look virtuous. In his time, it was religion that told people to be meek, to accept suffering without question. Today, it's society itself, disguised as kindness, tolerance, and safety. We live in a world that tells you, don't make people uncomfortable. Don't challenge the way things are. Don't be too intense. Fit in. Stay quiet. Be safe. But Nietzsche would ask, safe from what? From living? From truth? Think of this: we are surrounded by endless distractions, entertainment, news, social media, all designed to keep you from thinking too deeply. To keep you numb. To keep you entertained while your life passes by. Arthur Schopenhauer called this the will to live, the blind force that drives all human action. But modern society has turned this will into something empty. Instead of striving for greatness, we strive for convenience. Instead of facing the terrifying beauty of life, we run into endless consumption. And so, we become hollow. Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the concentration camps, understood this emptiness. He called it the existential vacuum, the sense that life has no meaning, that we are just drifting. And when there is no meaning, there is no strength. Because meaning gives you a reason to suffer, to endure, to fight. Without meaning, every discomfort feels unbearable. Every challenge feels like too much. But here's the brutal reality Nietzsche would throw in your face. You are weak because you have nothing worth suffering for. Modern life has stripped you of a cause, a goal, a struggle worthy of your pain. And in that emptiness, you become afraid of pain itself. Look around. How many people do you know who are truly willing to suffer for something greater than themselves? How many people embrace pain to grow stronger, instead of running from it? Instead, we see people addicted to escape, drugs, alcohol, endless scrolling, meaningless relationships. Anything to avoid sitting alone in a room with their own thoughts. And yet, Nietzsche would say, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. The secret of strength is hidden in this line. But let's pause here. Because to understand how deep this problem goes, you need to see how this weakness shapes everything in modern life: your relationships, your identity, your mind. The desire to avoid pain becomes a trap. You stay in a job you hate because changing would be painful. You stay in a dead relationship because being alone would be painful. You betray yourself daily because facing your real desires would mean facing rejection. And the more you avoid pain, the weaker you get. But here's the most dangerous part: you don't even realize it's happening. Because modern weakness doesn't look like weakness. It looks like politeness, niceness, comfort. It looks like following the rules, doing what you're told, never rocking the boat. But beneath that mask is a deep fear of life itself. You fear being hurt, so you avoid love. You fear failure, so you avoid greatness. You fear rejection, so you avoid speaking your truth. And in avoiding all these things, you lose yourself. Nietzsche called this the herd mentality, the way people follow the crowd, not because they believe in what they're doing, but because they are afraid to stand alone. So here's the paradox: the more you try to be safe, the more you destroy your own soul. And yet, there is a way out. But it is not easy. Because to be strong in Nietzsche's sense is to choose to suffer for something real. To confront your shadow. To embrace the terror of freedom. To will your own path, even when it means walking alone. But before we can talk about how to become strong, you need to see just how deep this weakness runs, and how it shapes not just individuals, but entire societies. Because only when you see the full cost of modern weakness will you finally have the courage to break free. And that is what we will confront next. Now that you see where this weakness comes from, how it was planted in you and nurtured by a world that fears real strength, it's time to confront what this really costs you. Because weakness isn't just a private flaw. It doesn't stay locked inside you like some personal defect. It bleeds into every part of your life, quietly shaping your choices, your thoughts, your identity. And worse, it shapes the world you live in. Imagine walking through a city filled with people who are afraid to speak their minds. Afraid to love deeply. Afraid to take risks. Afraid to confront injustice. Now ask yourself, what kind of world do you think that would be? Look around. That is the world we already live in. A world of people hiding behind fake smiles, empty conversations, shallow connections. A world where people are more afraid of offending others than of living a lie. A world that punishes truth and rewards mediocrity. But it gets darker. Because when people are weak, when they cannot face themselves, they don't just suffer in silence. They turn their pain outward. Nietzsche saw this as one of the most dangerous forces in human history: resentment. Think about it: when someone feels powerless, when they are filled with rage at their own inability to act, to speak, to live fully, where does that rage go? It has to go somewhere. And so, instead of facing themselves, weak people start to hate those who are strong. They despise those who dare to live courageously because those people remind them of what they have lost: their own will, their own power. Nietzsche called this ressentiment, a poisonous form of resentment that turns into moral superiority. Have you noticed how modern culture glorifies victimhood? How people compete to prove who is more oppressed, more hurt, more fragile? Because it's easier to claim moral high ground as a victim than to face the fact that you've abandoned your own strength. So instead of admiring courage, we shame it. Instead of celebrating truth, we censor it. Instead of honoring those who rise above suffering, we mock them because they remind us of what we refuse to become. But it doesn't stop there. When a society is built on this weakness, it starts to destroy anything that demands strength. Look at art. How often do you see art that celebrates struggle, heroism, or transcendence? Now, it's mostly safe, ironic, hollow. Look at love. How often do people risk everything for real love, knowing they could be hurt? Instead, they settle for half relationships, endless hookups, swiping left and right, too afraid to be vulnerable. Look at truth. How many people speak what they truly believe? Or do they just repeat what they think will get them accepted? This is what happens when weakness becomes a way of life. But let's go deeper, into your mind. Because this isn't just out there. It's inside you, shaping how you think. Psychologists talk about cognitive dissonance, the inner conflict you feel when your actions don't match your beliefs. But what if your whole life is built on dissonance? What if every day you feel that subtle tension because you know you are not living as you should, but you're too afraid to change? Every time you say yes when you mean no. Every time you stay silent when you want to speak. Every time you give in to fear instead of facing it. You die a little inside. And here's the terrifying part: your mind adapts. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is always rewiring itself, neuroplasticity. Every time you choose fear over courage, every time you avoid struggle, you are training your brain to be weaker. You are carving those pathways deeper until they become automatic. You're not just acting weak. You are becoming weak. And when enough people do this, a culture of weakness is born. A culture that no longer knows how to face reality, how to suffer for something meaningful, how to live beyond mere survival. Nietzsche would say this is where the last man is born, the one who has killed all his dreams just to be comfortable. The one who would rather live a long, dull life than risk anything for greatness. But here's what no one tells you. Weakness feels good at first. It feels good to avoid pain. It feels good to be accepted, to fit in, to stay safe. But the longer you stay in that comfort, the emptier you become. And at some point, you wake up, just like we imagined in the beginning, realizing that you don't know who you are anymore. Because when you spend your whole life running from pain, you never become the person you were meant to be. Schopenhauer said, "Suffering is the substance of life." And he was right. Not because life is only suffering, but because it's in suffering that you find out what you're made of. If you never suffer, you never grow. If you never struggle, you never learn your real strength. If you never face fear, you never become free. And here's the greatest consequence of all. When you avoid the pain of becoming yourself, you invite a greater pain, the pain of a wasted life. So ask yourself, what is the cost of your weakness? How many dreams have you abandoned because you were afraid? How many relationships have you ruined because you couldn't face vulnerability? How many truths have you silenced because you feared judgment? And if you keep living like this, who will you be at the end of your life? These are not comfortable questions. But Nietzsche didn't care about comfort. He cared about truth. About becoming who you are, not who the world tells you to be. So if you're still with me, if you're still reading, it means some part of you wants to be free. But freedom has a price. And in the next part, we will face that price head on. Because now that you see the cost of weakness, the only question left is, will you choose the storm? Or will you keep hiding from it? The rebellion starts here, so now you see it. The weakness that was planted in you. The price you've been paying. The life you've been losing. But what if I told you that you can rebel against all of it, against everything that made you weak, everything that keeps you numb? What if the very fact that you are reading this right now means that something in you is already waking up? Because rebellion, in Nietzsche's sense, does not start outside. It starts inside, with a decision so radical, so terrifying, that most people never make it. The decision to face life on your own terms. Not as they told you to live. Not as society expects you to live. But as you must live if you are to live at all. But let me warn you. This rebellion is not safe. It is not comfortable. It is not something you can dabble in. Because to rebel against weakness means to embrace pain, and not as an enemy, but as a teacher. So what does that look like? First, you must stop running from your shadow. Remember Jung's idea of the shadow? The part of you where all your repressed anger, fear, desire, and truth are buried. You cannot be strong until you make peace with your shadow. Because your shadow holds all the energy you need to fight back, all the wildness, the fire, the power that you've been told to hide. So start there. Sit with your darkness. Let yourself feel the rage, the pain, the fear. Ask yourself, what am I hiding? What am I running from? And when you find it, don't look away. Because here is the paradox of strength. The more you face what you fear, the less power it has over you. But if you avoid it, it grows. So, the first act of rebellion is this. Face yourself. All of yourself. Second, choose your suffering. Yes, choose it. Because Nietzsche believed that life will make you suffer, whether you like it or not. But if you choose your suffering, if you suffer for something you believe in, something that makes you stronger, then you own that pain. It becomes fuel. So ask yourself, what is worth suffering for? A dream? A truth? A life you haven't dared to live? Because here is the secret Nietzsche knew. The strongest people are not those who avoid suffering. They are those who choose a suffering that makes them grow. And that means saying no to easy things that make you weak, the endless scrolling, the cheap pleasures, the shallow conversations. And saying yes to the hard things that make you real, speaking the truth when it costs you, walking away from people who drain you, facing fears that paralyze you. It means breaking free from the herd. Nietzsche called most people the herd, those who live by following others, never thinking for themselves, never daring to stand alone. But strength begins when you say, I will think for myself, even if it costs me everything. So ask yourself, what do I believe? What do I value? Not what you were told to believe. Not what makes you popular. But what is real to you? And once you know, live by it without apology. Even if people reject you. Even if you stand alone. Because here's another secret Nietzsche knew. You can only be free when you are willing to be alone. And maybe you felt that fear, the fear of being rejected, abandoned, judged. But what if I told you that loneliness is not your enemy? Because in loneliness, you meet yourself for the first time. You see who you are without the masks. And yes, it's terrifying. But it's also the moment when you begin to take your power back. So when the world tells you to stay small, to stay quiet, to fit in, rebel. Speak. Act. Risk. Because nothing changes until you do. And here's something even darker, but also more beautiful, Nietzsche believed. Strength is born in struggle. He wrote, what does not kill me makes me stronger. But we've turned that into a cliché, a slogan. What he really meant was far deeper. That when you suffer, when you fight through darkness, you emerge transformed. Not because the world gets easier, but because you get stronger. So think of the hardest moments of your life. The pain you thought would destroy you. The fear you thought you couldn't survive. And yet, you're still here. Breathing. Reading these words. You've already survived so much more than you give yourself credit for. So imagine what would happen if you chose to face struggle. Instead of waiting for life to force it on you. Imagine if you chose to fight for something that set your soul on fire. What would you become? Because Nietzsche would say, strength is not given to you. You have to take it. You have to will it. You have to fight for it. And here's the final act of rebellion. Stop waiting. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the fear to go away. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Because there is no perfect moment. There is only now. And what you choose to do with this moment will define who you are. So ask yourself, right now, in this moment, who do you choose to be? The one who keeps running? Or the one who turns to face the storm? Because here's the truth. The storm will always come. But you? You can choose to meet it. To stand in it. To let it forge you into something no one can break. This is the rebellion. The rebellion against everything that has made you weak. The rebellion that reclaims your life. But there is still one thing left. The final, most terrifying, most powerful truth. The truth that Nietzsche knew, but most people never dare to face. And that is what we will uncover next. Now we come to it, the truth you were never meant to know. The truth that, if you really see it, will shatter everything you've been told about life, strength, happiness, and who you are supposed to be. It is a truth so heavy that most people spend their entire lives running from it, distracting themselves, numbing themselves, filling their days with noise just to avoid hearing it whisper in the dark. But you've made it this far. So I'll say it clearly. No one is coming to save you. No mentor, no parent, no friend, no lover, no government, no belief system, no religion. Nothing and no one will step into your life, take your hand, and lead you to the life you were meant to live. You are alone with the weight of existence. And if that terrifies you, good. It should. Because this is the truth that Nietzsche knew would break most people if they ever saw it clearly. But here's the paradox, the same paradox at the heart of everything Nietzsche ever wrote. Once you accept that no one is coming to save you, once you embrace the full weight of that truth, you become free in a way no one can ever take from you. Think about it. If no one is coming, then there are no rules. No path you must follow. No story you must live. There is only the life you choose to create. And yes, that means radical responsibility. It means every choice is yours. Every failure is yours. Every success is yours. It means you can no longer blame the world, your past, your parents, or fate. But it also means you are finally free to become the creator of your own existence. Nietzsche called this the will to power, not the power to dominate others, but the power to shape yourself, to will your life into being. The power to say yes to life, even to its pain, its cruelty, its indifference. Imagine what it would feel like to walk through life knowing you are no longer waiting for anyone's permission. To wake up and say, "Today, I create my life. Today, I decide what I value, what I fight for, what I become." But here's the part no one tells you: freedom is terrifying. Because once you are free, you cannot hide behind excuses anymore. You cannot say, "I couldn't because they wouldn't let me." You cannot say, "I didn't because I was waiting for the right time." Freedom means facing yourself in the rawest, most honest way possible. But this is where real strength is born. Because when you stop running from the truth that no one is coming, when you stop waiting for life to hand you meaning, you realize that meaning is something you must create. There is no meaning out there waiting to be found. You give life meaning through the way you choose to live. Through the suffering you are willing to endure. Through the battles you are willing to fight. Through the love you are willing to give, even knowing you could lose everything. And this is why Nietzsche didn't just want you to accept life. He wanted you to say yes to it, fully, fiercely, without reservation. Even to the pain. Even to the chaos. Even to the things that break your heart. Because to say yes to life means to say yes to your own power to create meaning in a meaningless universe. Think about that. You, standing in a world that does not care whether you succeed or fail, whether you live or die. And yet, in the face of that, you choose to live with purpose anyway. That is the highest form of strength. That is what Nietzsche meant by becoming the Übermensch, the one who rises above the herd, above fear, above weakness, to create their own path. But here's the part that most people miss. Becoming this version of yourself is not about being fearless. It's about feeling the fear and acting anyway. It's about knowing the darkness and still choosing to bring your own light. So ask yourself, right now, in this moment, if I stopped waiting to be saved, what would I do with my life? Who would I become if I stopped waiting for someone to tell me I'm worthy? What truth would I speak if I stopped fearing rejection? What would I fight for if I stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission? Because here's the final, brutal, liberating truth. This life is yours. No one else's. If you don't live it, no one will. If you don't speak your truth, it will die with you. If you don't fight for something real, you will spend your life chasing shadows. And this is the cure to modern weakness. Not a motivational quote. Not a quick fix. Not another shallow promise that everything will be okay. But the deep, terrifying, beautiful truth that you are responsible for your own life, and that in accepting that, you become free. So now, ask yourself, what is the life you are going to create? What is the meaning you will give to your suffering? What is the truth you will live, no matter what it costs you? Because if you choose to walk this path, you will suffer. You will be rejected. You will be afraid. You will lose people who cannot handle your truth. But you will gain something far greater. You will gain yourself. Your real self. The self that no one can give you and no one can take away. The self that is forged in struggle and made strong by facing life directly, without masks, without lies. So as Nietzsche would say, become who you are. Not who they told you to be. Not who the world wants you to be. But who you are when you face yourself completely. And if you do that, if you walk that path, then you will have found the one thing that modern society fears more than anything. A human being who is free, strong, and alive. So I'll ask you one final time. Who do you choose to become? Because no one is coming to save you. But if you choose it, you can save yourself. And in doing so, you will become unstoppable.